Well. Good morning, George. Good morning, Chewy. How is everyone today?
Good, mate. Good.
I was just thinking, if people have who are joining us or are going to join us, you can see for the first time ever, we've broken our rule of doing sort of three. What is it called? Three graphics on the opening of the show. We've just gone with two graphics today, because of course you can see here 2/3 of the graphic are taken up with a little certain something that happened yesterday afternoon that shook up the world, so to speak. Biggest news story of the day, whilst we all acknowledge not the most important news story of the day, wasn't the biggest news story of the day. So welcome, guys. Thanks for joining us today. And look, George, I got to say to you, mate, and for people who are joining us, George is here every day with us and works behind the scenes a lot of the time putting the show together. Chewy, I think you heard earlier that George didn't know about the Will Smith event until this morning. I think the only person in the Western world that didn't actually know anything about it until about 9 o'clock this morning, George.
Yeah, I'm kind of sort of actually proud of that. It shows that yesterday maybe I wasn't doing anything more important than looking at Will Smith slapping what's his face? Chris Rock. I
was certainly at work, and I don't know, I've got a spidey sense for this sort of thing, and I was just like, something has happened. The meme factories have fired up.
Well, we are going to be talking about that today. A little bit later on, we're going to have joining us Kate Rodger, who is the media and film critic from Newshub here in New Zealand. But also, for the last probably 20 minutes of the show, we are touching base with Nicole Sperling, who is a media and entertainment reporter from the New York Times. And she was actually in the building when this whole thing went down. So we're going to be having a chat with her about the vibe of what happened in the building. She was in the press room. She wasn't in the actual room, but obviously in the press room, all the actors and artists and stuff come through as well. So we'll probably do that in the second part of this hour. In the first part of this hour, we're going to be having a chat with Guyon Espiner, who is an investigative journalist. He's been the co-host of Morning Report. I don't think he's doing that right now for Radio New Zealand, about a report that's been put out by the IPCA, which is the Independent Police Conduct Authority, about police shootings in New Zealand. Guyon is part of a team that's written about the report, which kind of basically says we suck when it comes to our police shooting people. I mean, it's a bit of an unfair paraphrase perhaps, but that's sort of what it says, comparing us to other countries around the world, except not America, obviously, because America sucks hardest of all. So we're going to be doing that as well. And yeah, that's it. So thanks for everyone joining us today, and thanks for being involved. Remember, we are live streaming in New Zealand here. It's coming up 11 a.m. So you can comment on the live stream, and some of the comments we will happily use and share out there as well. Chewy, how are you, mate? Welcome back for this week. Good to see you in your orange hat.
It's cold. Summer is over.
I think I saw. That's good. I think I saw that. Is it 2 weeks away we lose daylight savings as well? I've been running the dog most evenings. The thing I love about Dunedin is we get, the sun will light until kind of 10, 10:30, even 11 o'clock at night in the summer. And I realized just yesterday that in 2 weeks' time, the sun will be going down at 6 p.m. and I'm going to have to figure out how to run the dog during the day rather than the last thing I do at night at 8:45 because it's still light outside. So, yes.
I look forward to it.
Yes. All right, George. Thank you for your work on the show so far this morning. I appreciate what you've done as well. And as we said, people who are watching and joining in, feel free to contribute and comment, and we will get to those as we go through the show. We will welcome to the show this morning, though, from Radio New Zealand, Guyon Espiner. Guyon, good morning and welcome to the show, sir.
Kia ora, thanks for having me.
Kia ora, very good to be with you. Of course, we've got you on to report about the biggest news story of the day, which is the Will Smith incident. No, I'm not just kidding. We're not gonna talk about that. That's going to be the second half of the show.
Quite happy to give my
Yeah. Well, go for it. Guyon Espiner on Will Smith assaulting Chris Rock. Go, sir.
Well, I'll probably get myself in trouble for this, but I did have a certain amount of sympathy for him. We've all been there, haven't we? Someone assaults someone you love, and you sort of, get passionate about it.
I can definitely relate to the passion.
I've got a certain degree of sympathy for him, and it was an open hand, it wasn't the end of the world.
Sweet.
All right, Guyon, the actual reason we've got you on, obviously, is to talk about this report that you guys at RNZ have put out titled License to Kill, the startling truth about New Zealand's fatal police shootings. Why don't we just start by giving you the floor somewhat, sir, and giving us a heads up as to what it's all about, why you've written about it, and what it tells us.
Yeah, thanks for that. Look, I got really interested in this subject when I started to investigate a particular police shooting of Shargan Stevens some 5 or 6 years ago in Rotorua, and started to look at what happens when police kill. It's a homicide. They then have to investigate, and in our system, they're the only ones who investigate, so they investigate themselves. And how robust are those investigations, and what actually happens? And so we thought we'd take a really big, in-depth look at this. And so you've got to start with what's the magnitude of the problem. I mean, how often do police fatally kill someone? And we found out quite a lot compared to other countries we might compare ourselves with, about 11 times per capita than England and Wales. So roughly 40 people shot dead since 1990. And it's a lot more than Australia or Finland or Japan or England, Wales. America's out there on its own, as you can probably imagine. But per capita wise, we do have a lot of fatal shootings. And then you're looking at, well, what were these circumstances? A lot of people think, they're armed gang members. And look, if someone's got a gun and they're shooting at you, I don't think there's any debate. But a lot of these cases, it's not the case. A lot of these guys had hammers, bats, and were smashing up windows, and you get shot for that in New Zealand. Obviously, disproportionately Māori, that's often the case. But also, a lot of these people didn't have guns at all. So we looked at that, looked at what the circumstances were of these shootings and how often it happens, and then we also looked at how often, how these things are actually investigated when the police actually go and do investigate them, these themselves. How robust are they? What happens? How do they actually manage these conflicts of interest? So I guess that's how we got started on.
One of the things I was looking at is the IPCA and how they investigate. So basically what we're saying is the police investigate the police. The data and stuff that we're looking at now start in 1990. I looked at some of the information pre-1990, and 39 deaths by police since 1990, but I think it's only 47 in total since 1941. So for the previous 50 years, there was only an additional 8 citizens killed by New Zealand police. What's changed? What's changed since 1990 to see this hockey stick up of people being killed by police compared to the previous 50 years? And I got to say, the previous 50 years also before the IPCA, which makes me think, how were things investigated prior to 1990? Yeah, so there's sort of two angles there. Why the hockey stick, and how was it investigated?
Yeah, and both good angles. I hadn't actually looked into the pre-1991, so it's a new point you're raising with me, and I did look pretty closely into this. A couple of things come to mind. There are vastly more police nowadays. Every political party, especially if they're in coalition with Winston Peters, but just about every sort of bargaining election, the promises to increase the numbers of police, and this goes down incredibly well. 14,000 staff in the police now. Not quite that many police, but not far shy of it. So that's vastly increased. The also thing is access to police for firearms. So we say that we're an unarmed police force. Well, we are in the sense that we don't carry the guns on the hips, and so it's not visible to you. But in every police car, there are 2 Bushmaster M4 semi-automatic rifles that are, serious killing machines, and Glock pistols. So there are 4 of those guns in every police car. So, a lot of these cases that I looked at, a cop can come back to the car and grab the gun or arm up as they are going out to a job. which never would have been the case in those earlier years. So the access to firearms is obviously a big one. You could overlay a whole bunch of social problems to that. I mean, let's be honest, meth has been an impact, and drugs and alcohol, and I count alcohol in that, are a big impact. And you can see a bunch of social problems overlaid over that. But I think sheer numbers of police and access to firearms is a big one.
Just before I throw to either George or Chewy, just so you know, actually the reason I got to 41 was from some RNZ reporting as well. So this was an article from 2015 that listed the number of shootings since 1941 as 65, and then I just used your numbers and added in the ones beyond it, and that's how I got to whatever it was, 47. So that's that. Just so people know, that's the way I worked it out, and does raise a question about only 8 people in 50 years versus, like I'm saying, 40 people in 30 years. What does the data say about us compared to the rest of the world for 80 years versus the 30 years, and why the hockey stick? I'm interested in those, delving into those at some stage as well.
Yeah, absolutely.
Hey,
guys, want to jump in?
Guyon, when you're looking at the IPCA reporting, so I'm just looking at a quote here. The chair, Colin Doherty, said that they were justified on the basis that these shootings were justified on the basis of self-defense, but, and this is important, said in multiple cases the police put themselves in a position where firearms were the only option. What's your sort of assessment of how the Independent Police Conduct Authority is basically policing the police, and is there a problem maybe with language and categories going on there?
Yeah, another good question, and we've got a big report out tomorrow which looks solely at the IPCA, so keep an eye out for that. But yeah, that's really interesting, isn't it? Because it's in the final frame, right? And the Americans call it officer created jeopardy. So if I rush right up to you and then we have a confrontation and then I shoot you and I say, look, I thought he was going to kill me, then under Section 48 of the Crimes Act, that's a legally justified shooting, because anyone is legally allowed to use as much self-defense as the circumstances warranted. And you'll find that the police have never prosecuted one of their own, and in every one of these cases the IPCA says the shooting was legally justified. But then if you look at the full frame of it, why did the situation happen? And we went and talked initially about why I first became interested in this was a shooting of Shargan Stevens, who in the 38 days before the incident, right, he's a guy who he flipped out and he smashed up a cop car with a weed slasher. No one in the cop car at the time. He smashed all the windows. He got shot. Now, in the 38 days leading up to that, they bail checked him 70 times, including at 3:15 in the morning, 1:49 in the morning, 2:15 in the morning, twice a day. Kept waking him up. Now, that's one example where there's a certain amount of provocation there, and the opposite strategy in an incident obviously is cordon and contain. I'm not an expert. I'm an armchair warrior in this respect. I haven't gone out there and done this, what the cops have done. So look, hats off to them. This is dangerous, hard stuff. But in police forces where they have fewer of these shootings, often that's the approach that they use: a cordon and contain and a de-escalation sense. So, but yeah, to get more pinpointed in the answer to that, I think that the IPCA powers are weak. They don't have the power to prosecute. They can only make recommendations to the police. Other bodies overseas, people might have seen in the Line of Duty, the British drama series, where they go really hard on the cops, AC-12, the anti-corruption unit. Other countries have police monitoring bodies that can seriously get in there and robustly and aggressively investigate and prosecute the police. We don't have that, and it's left to the police to prosecute themselves. And I think to be a rocket scientist to work out that creates a certain conflict of interest and a perception that they go easy on their own.
Hey, Guyon, from the investigating of this from your side, I guess you're investigating the investigating, aren't you? Because it's looking at the IP. Yeah. Have you got any personal opinions or any conclusions you've drawn for some of these that aren't justified from what you've looked at?
I think it goes back to the position that they've put themselves in. And I look at, say, the Jerem Toms shooting, where the officers fired thinking they were the only ones at the scene, yet there was a dog handler getting his car. There were 7 or 8 police cars behind them. No communication, a helicopter above, so the marshalling of the resources are all there to bring down a guy who did have a machete. That must have been frightening, but you had multiple officers at the scene and huge amounts of resources. And could you have done something to save a guy who, again, was mentally ill? That's the other very sad thing. A lot of these people are having episodes. Look, that must be frightening to deal with, but is that the way that we want to deal with them? And so I think you've got a problem if you're only relying on the final frame and saying, well, was my life potentially in danger? Well, yes, it was. And so I was justified in using lethal force. And I think you've got to look at the whole incident rather than the final frame.
There's a lot of comments that I see about the levels of training, and I just kind of want to come off something you said there, the massive increase in police numbers, and it's always a political sort of candy to throw around, I guess. Is the big push to get more officers taking a chunk out of the time that they have to train these officers to be effective in their firearms, both their usage and their deployment?
Oh, it's another very good question. I mean, undoubtedly, they're pushing these people through. It's one of the shortest training courses in the Western world. I mean, we do 16 weeks. You think about that. I mean, that is a very short time to be into a job like that. I mean, in some countries, you look at some of the Scandinavian countries, they take months, I think Denmark, to look at the role of police in society, and okay, you'd get criticised for being woke or something if you did that here, but, obviously they are. I mean, this is a state-sanctioned force with amazing coercive powers. So is 16 weeks enough? And then you've got 1 week of firearms training. I mean, and so when you look at it, it's about 650 hours, and we looked through, and in Germany it's about 10,000 hours, and we've laid it all out in one of those pieces. I can't remember all the numbers, but Australia is like 3,500. We are down there with the lowest states in America. In America, there's no mandatory level because they don't really like regulation terribly much, and so, but roughly it's about 650 hours. It's similar to New Zealand. So I don't know. Ask yourself. I mean, 16 weeks and then 1 week on firearms training. Yes, they do have ongoing training as they go, but when you talk to experts in this area, they say that that's not nearly enough, and they say that there's a spiral and a cycle that works with that. Poor firearms training, poor marksmanship, meaning you then shoot for the largest target, which is the centre body mass, which is gonna pretty much kill you, and so that it sort of feeds on itself. So I think training is something that you can't really ignore in this debate.
I wanted to ask you about what's sort of bouncing off the back of the last thing I asked you, Guyon, about the justified versus unjustified. I mean, I think a lot of people, I put my hand up and go, one of the things that feels unjustifiable is being shot in the back, but because that probably means the person's running away and then maybe there's no danger. But from your article, I'm interested into how one of these things has been worded. You say RNZ data analysis of the 35 IPCA investigations into police shootings showed 10 of these killed were shot in the back or from behind at least once. The first question that I wanted to know is, what do you mean or from behind? What's the difference with or from behind or in the back? And the second question was, when they were shot in the back, these 10, do we know if they were only shot in the back, or like, were they shot in the arm and then they turned and ran and were then shot in the back? So like, was it their only hit, or was it a part of being hit 2 or 3 times? But also, what do you mean or from behind? What does that mean?
Well, they may have been shot in the side or in the leg, but we're moving away from the officer. And yes, in some cases it was both. And we talked a little bit about the Jerem Toms case before. That was a situation where he was shot as he was advancing, and he turned and ran, and they fired another 8 shots as he ran away, and one of those did hit him in the back, in the lower back. And the last shot was fired, I think, at 14 or 15 meters. So he'd run a considerable distance, and then he collapsed and died. But yeah, again, that doesn't really feel right to me. You've got a real issue there with self-defense, haven't you? And that was one that really did surprise me, that IPCA said that was justified. And this is another really interesting thing, right? Because under New Zealand law, it's the perception of the officer. If I say I felt my life was in danger, I believed my life was in danger, and the officer, when I looked at the homicide investigation into that, said that he believed that Toms was still coming towards him, even though he had turned and he'd run 10, 12, then 14 meters. Now, okay, possibly in the heat of the moment, he didn't realize and he was just firing. But it's interesting that there's that hole in the homicide law that it's your perception. Were you acting in your self-defense as you perceived it at the time?
Yeah.
The test of a rational test. I mean, to me, does that make sense? To you and I, if I said, well, you're a good chunk of a cricket pitch away, moving away from me, and I still thought you were coming towards me, I'd probably say, nah, that doesn't stack up to me. But you are able, under New Zealand law, as it's interpreted, to say, well, my perception was he was still advancing on me. So again, I think that's an issue.
So just for clarity, that or from behind basically means on the back part of their body, but it might be in their leg or their calf muscle, or their just not literally in the physical between the shoulders.
That's right.
Okay, cool. That's what I want to know. Chewy, George, you got anything else to wrap up? What we got going here?
Guyon, we were looking at the sort of secondary articles as well that came from this reporting. Was there more than one IPCA report, and was there much kind of pushback trying to get this released? I know that one of the reports mentions the word secret, so we wanted to sort of clarify that as well.
Yeah, well, I suppose this goes to tomorrow, Wednesday, we're releasing our investigation into the IPCA that focuses on the IPCA itself and how it works and what the powers are, etc. The IPCA, interestingly, is not subject to the Official Information Act.
Oh, really?
No, and we look at this tomorrow. So there's a bit of a heads up there. But yeah, so you can ask for all the information you like, but you won't get it, not officially. Luckily, sometimes things fall off backs of trucks, and we got a report that had only been sent to the police commissioner. It hadn't been made public, and I think it has some real issues of that go to training and public interest. So yes, the IPCA will release its reports into, if someone's shot tomorrow, then in about a year's time, you'll see the report from the IPCA, and it will be on their website, and they'll make it public. But none of the other stuff behind it, like how they justified this, who did what, the full transcripts, the raw bits of this and that, get made public. And nor do any other reports they commission or information or emails. Like journalists, we're in there OIAing the cops and others all the time, Ministry of Health, please give me all Ashley Bloomfield's emails that he sent about such and such, there's all that goes on. And you get a whole lot of stuff that's not interesting, but you do sift through the nuggets of stuff of real public interest, which is why we have an Official Information Act, and America has freedom of information laws, and that's how the whole thing works. IPCA is not subject to the Official Information Act. So, I think that's pretty interesting. My own view is that it should be. I think it's farcical that the SIS is subject to the OIA and the IPCA isn't. So, yeah, it's not easy to get information out of them other than their public reports, and I think that's a problem.
Well, listen, Guyon, thanks so much for coming in. I've got one more question for you before you let you go.
It's not about Will Smith, is it?
It's not actually, although I noticed that Chris Luxon's just talked about Will Smith.
Is he? What does he say?
He says, meme of Will Smith slapping Chris Rock posted on by National on Facebook wasn't appropriate.
How to turn it into your own problem.
Breaking news. Chris Luxon says, don't smack people. I'll leave that one alone. So here's where people can find it on the RNZ website, obviously. But I guess just to wrap, and I know it sounds like what you're telling us is there's more to come, but if you had one takeaway to share at the moment from what you've done and what you've looked at from this investigation, what is it? What's the one thing that you're taking away from that's kind of top of mind when you're thinking about what you're looking at and what you're doing?
Yeah, a couple of things. IPCA powers are too weak. They have no powers. They don't have the power to prosecute, and they should be more transparent. Farcical not to be open to the OAA. The police go too soft on their own, in my view. These homicide investigations aren't genuine, aren't robust enough. They give the evidence to them in advance. You don't give the kids the answers to the homework the night before. That's farcical. Detectives know that, and they should know better. They've stopped it, and again, I hope partially that we've played a role in that. So they would be the things that I would take away, and also that we shoot too many people too often. If Britain can do far less of it, and we model ourselves on them in so many ways, and especially on our police force, if we're going to be proud about the fact we've only got, that we don't have an armed police force, let's save that for the most dangerous incidents, when people have guns, not when people are smashing up stuff in the street or are mentally ill. So that'd be my takeaways.
Guyon Espiner, thank you so much for joining us today. It's been a great pleasure, and we will keep looking and keep delving into the investigative journalism that you guys are doing over there at RNZ. And thanks for coming on.
Hey, thanks very much for the opportunity, guys. Really enjoyed it.
Thanks, mate.
All right, team. Yeah, there you go. Gosh, there's so much to think about, hey? So much to think about with that whole thing.
Yeah, I think he's right. It's just a case of stuff not being fit for purpose. You can't make changes in one area and then just think the systems that you've had set up are still appropriate.
Yeah. There's some messages that have come in as well. We've got a few minutes to continue talking about this, George. Crazy says armed defenders probably get a massive amount of training and psychological support. Then we give guns to street police and wonder why shootings are questionable. Yeah, that's true, because probably my understanding is armed defenders, basically, if they're not out being armed defenders in the community, they're training. So that seems to be the one area that handles firearms that is maybe does get those 10,000 hours like Guyon was talking about, compared to your Bobby on the beat, as they used to say. Gareth also says, mate is a cop. He said weapons training is woeful. Often it's not trained armed offenders who are the first responders to an incident. That kind of echoes, those two comments kind of echo one another, actually, I guess.
Yeah, I was totally taken aback that the IPCA isn't beholden to OIA requests. And it sounds like Guyon and his team are doing a bit of work around that, and that they'll be releasing some news articles and stuff tomorrow, which is good, because maybe that will put pressure on them to become beholden to the IPCA. And also interesting what he said about, the sort of lack of powers that they might have as well in this. Yeah, that's like kind of dodgy, right? It's not just the increased police forces and not militarization, but increased arming, plus the sort of secretive nature of the people who are the people that are meant to police the police is worrying.
You're always in trouble. You're always in trouble when the we don't do that. I mean, I'm not calling the police children, but you don't say to your kids, what are your have you done something wrong, firstly, and if you had, what's the punishment going to be? You don't say that to anyone. So it is, and it's the world over, whether it's in America or whatever, the police kind of policing the police seems to be a problem. Although we do see it in other places, politicians police politicians with their censures and that kind of stuff. But maybe it's something we need to look at in
the corporate world, I think, as well, right? That often banks are meant to hold themselves accountable, right? That they have these departments which make sure they're following the rules, as it were, but they're totally based within the bank, right, and work for the bank and are totally following the interests of the bank. I mean, that whole system is built into the system, as it were.
All right. Anything you want to wrap up there with, Chewy, before we move on to the important news of the day, which is a man assaulting a man in front of 1 billion people?
No, I'm good. Let's crack on with this.
I think George is going to leave because this conversation is beneath him now. Is that the case, George? George,
yeah, that's
George's position is I don't give a fuck. So George is going to go away. I mean, biggest news story in the day, George, and this is literal breaking news as we're talking about Oscar attack. Our National Party share Will Smith memes before deleting them. Our National Party leader Christopher Luxon has spoken out after his party and some of his MPs shared memes based on Will Smith's assault of Chris Rock during the 2022 Oscars. Luxon said today he was aware of the memes being posted and it was inappropriate for MPs to share the message. I was pleased to hear that they were taken down within 20 minutes. So
I saw it in that 20 minutes and I was like, oh shit, this is going down. Yeah, it must be hard running social media for National. Because they've had some utter shitlords doing that job.
All right. Well, listen, we are going to have a chat now. Shortly, we're going to be talking to the New York Times, to a journalist who was in the building when this all happened. But right now, let's bring on the Newshub entertainment editor and film reviewer, Kate Rodger. Kate, good morning to you.
Hey, guys. Can you hear me okay?
Marvelous. You're sounding amazing. You're looking amazing. And we thank you for joining us.
Oh, look, it's an absolute bloody pleasure, mate. Thanks for asking me.
I thought, you know what, to be honest, I thought when I saw you on Newshub last night, I saw the clip on YouTube and it was 1:27. I thought, Kate's got more to say about this than that show's given her in 1:27. So let's get her on and talk about what we all saw. And as I said, we're going to be talking shortly to a journalist from the New York Times who was there. Yeah. But yeah, I guess just floor is yours, Kate. You're the expert in this whole kind of entertainment world. Tell us your thoughts about what you saw yesterday.
That's very flattering. I wish I was a true expert. But yeah, I've covered a lot of Oscars in the flesh, and unfortunately, due to having COVID, I couldn't go over for this one. And you can imagine how gutted I was when the biggest news story and what feels like forever unfolded in front of our freaking eyes. It was so crazy because I was sitting here at my desk in the newsroom watching the unfolding, literally headphones on, batting away, doing the scripting that I need to do for the story. And I thought that we'd just lost sound as I was looking at the TV, and I thought, that's weird. Why have we lost sound? And then it just erupted from there. I couldn't believe my eyes because, like everybody else, and like you dudes probably thought, I thought the whole smacking was a full setup. I didn't think it was real. And that's when things slowly descended into madness. And I was thinking, can somebody please lip read Will Smith? Because I'm pretty sure he's telling Chris Rock to go fuck himself. So yeah, it was intense, wasn't it? It was intense. And you're right. It was very late in the piece. We had a 6 o'clock program to get together and we slammed it all together and away we went.
So let me check this. You were, because I was watching it as well, but I was watching it TV2 online on demand.
Yeah. Yeah.
TV2, were you watching them? Because that didn't cut at all.
I know. So weirdly enough, we get, because we're not TVNZ, we don't have the rights, we get it directly from ABC. So that gets fed through PAC TV in LA directly into our foreign suite. So we didn't have the sound. So, and I didn't get to see it until Japanese TV tweeted it. And then of course, lots of Kiwis were going, no, this is actually going down in real time. And I've had a chat since then, obviously. Petra Brett Kelly is a top-notch documentary filmmaker here in New Zealand. She was in the audience at the Oscars. She's a voter. She got invited. She went. Wow. I Zoomed with her in the last half an hour. And oh my Lord, she said it was absolute pandemonium. And she had, bird's eye view of everything went down, and no one could believe it. The shock and awe in that room. She said the whole crowd mentality of something like this, because we look at it and we look. Firstly, Will Smith laughed at Chris Rock's joke to begin with.
And clap.
If you saw that cutaway, and clap. And then looked at Jada, who went, if you were watching her when that joke was said, and don't get me wrong, that was a tasteless bullshit joke. She rolled her eyes, and that's when Smith kind of went into action. At that moment, everybody's still laughing. And even his yelling, they're still laughing. But for her, for Petra, it was actually that she felt so incensed when everybody gave him a standing ovation after he did his winner's speech for Best Actor. So they're almost two different reactions to two different parts of what was an unfolding story. I don't know. What are your thoughts on his speech?
Yeah, let's have a look at this as well, because you're talking about a bird's eye view. Obviously, what happened straight away is people grabbed out their phones. So this is this is a literal bird's eye view from inside the building. This is after the slap. Now, this down here in this corner, you'll see Will Smith down here. This is when Bradley Cooper came up to him and gave him a hug. There's 2 clips. The second one is actually Denzel talking to him. Apparently, Denzel talked to him and kind of, talked about what was going on, and then Bradley Cooper talked to him. But Will Smith's crying in the ad break. If you can see this, if you can't see this, put it on your smart TV when you get home. You'll see at one stage he pulls a hanky out of his pocket and he wipes his eyes. So it's emotion filled. Just have a look. I'm not going to play the sound, but if you have a look at the action down. So there's Will Smith and Bradley Cooper right? Embracing. We all got that. So this is after the slap. Will Smith puts his hands in his pockets, pulls out a handkerchief of some sort, and then sits back down next to his wife.
Yeah. What does that say to you?
It says to me, yo, I think I just fucked up. Maybe. I mean, maybe, like I tweeted out yesterday, and I'm not saying I know this for sure, but it feels like 15 Seconds of Madness has ruined 30 years of being one of the nicest guys in Hollywood. Like, I know some people are jumping on the bandwagon who are like, oh, I've never rated Will Smith. No, I'm a huge Will Smith fan.
Same.
Like his music, his movies, even his bad ones with his son, I've watched. But he's been the person for me that there's not many of them, but if I see their name in a movie, that's the reason I will watch that movie. So my opinions aren't coming from a hater, they're coming from the opposite. But
no, but you're coming from the heart of what. So I feel exactly the same as you. And I've had the privilege of interviewing him 3 separate times. He's a gentleman, he's a generous interview. I know he's always selling something and he understands the business of selling. And you get a real insight into that if you read his book, which by the way is a cracking read. I'm sure he'll be adding a few more chapters to that before it gets re-released on Audible. But it is, as a Will Smith fan, you're kind of heartbroken. And Denzel said to him, it's in that moment where the devil comes for you. And oh, God, ain't that the truth?
But I also think that's a load of shit, because what he did in his speech, which you asked us about, sorry, True, you can jump in after me. I'm hogging the limelight here, speaking of Hollywood, is he evoked God or religion at least twice. And as soon as you do that, what you're saying is don't question me and don't challenge me. This is a spiritual thing. I've got God on my side. So I thought that was abhorrent, another abhorrent part of the whole conversation.
Look, but also that he said that love makes you do crazy things. You know, it also makes, other men beat the absolute shit out of their wives. I mean, love does crazy things. Sure. It's not acceptable in any way, shape or form to someone to get up on the stage at the Oscars and smack another human being.
I've seen a lot of people, like I do stand-up comedy and that sort of thing, and certainly the discussion among stand-up comedians is like, well, first of all, shitty joke. Like,
shitty joke.
Wrong venue. You're not doing a late night comedy thing. It's not a roast battle. Yeah. Not cool. But then the shift is pretty dramatic of people going, hey, look, when you're up on stage like that, you're all alone. And the amount of stories that came out of comedians of like, it reminds me of this one time that someone didn't like what I said and came up, smacked me in the mouth on stage and that sort of thing. And what can you do? So it's been interesting. Like, my whole take on this is that there isn't a winner here. It's certainly not Jada. It's not Will, and it's not Chris. It's just a shit show.
Well, I mean, it's like a Kanye moment times 1,000. I mean, Will Smith forevermore won't be celebrated for his Oscar win. That's not what people are going to remember. I mean, every time he's been up, whether it's Ali, Pursuit of Happiness, all these things, I'm like, I hope he wins. And now he's like, all I'm thinking about and talking about is not finally, it's this assault. And I'm going to keep using the word assault, because people who are saying, it's just him defending his wife. It's like, well, so what we're saying is, violence is never the answer unless you say it is because you think you have a good reason to do it. From the same community that's often criticized for being, too soft and open and safe space and, protect these groups and make sure, and words of violence and all that kind of stuff, are now defending some within that sector from actual violence committed between two people. I think it's horrible. I think it's disgusting.
Hey, what's your thought on how the Academy's reacted to this?
Too little, too late. They moved too slowly. I mean, I honestly, I realized saying this from the outside, it was probably problematic to do, but I come back to, if it was anybody else, they would have been out of there in a heartbeat. So I know, and I'm naive in saying this because he was about to win an Oscar, but if it had been anyone else, they would have been out of there. I think he should have been out of there. If I have to pick one side or the other, understanding that it's not a black and white world we live in, but if I had to pick one, it said he should have been out of the building. And I think that it's just evidence of sort of fame privilege, that famous people and wealthy people and powerful people can get away and do things that us mere mortals could never do. Sorry, Chewy.
Yeah.
I mean, the Academy put out that that statement in pretty short order that they don't condone violence, rah. They are getting clapped on social media for that.
Yeah,
because they have given, how many awards has Harvey Weinstein still got?
Well, he's only got one Oscar, but he's been involved in like 81 different Oscars over the years. He's still got his sitting on his bloody wall in his prison cell. So there's not a lot of context when it comes to that kind of thing. Petra this morning made a really great comment to me, which I thought, imagine this world where instead they maybe took him out of the building and maybe Serena and Venus accepted his award on his behalf. Can you imagine how powerful that would have been? I don't know. Variety's just put out a story about what the hell was going on in the ABC control room at the time. I haven't had a chance to properly read that. In terms of it unfolding events, we had an Oscars that ran 40 minutes over its suspected duration when they spent the last 2 weeks cutting genuine Oscars out of that awards. So it would be a short telecast. And also it overshadowed everything else that came after that, not just him, but Campion and Coda. And yes, of course, we're talking about this and we should be talking about this. But for me, as a nerdy cinephile, it's kind of gutting.
I mean, as far as sending a message goes, imagine if after that, Jada and Will just got up and left. And then they go to present the best actor and he's not there and everybody knows why he's not there.
Or he had have said in his speech, like he hadn't done anything. And in his speech, he had have pointed out about, making jokes about someone's ailment or whatever is. And I mean, how much more power? Then Chris Rock would have been the arse today. And Will Smith would have been magnanimous and he would have been, and Jada Smith, rather than looking like she was sucking on a lemon, would have been, gracious. And they would have been even more Hollywood royal today than they were in the previous sort of 10 years.
He would still have smacked him on stage, though. You talk about Hollywood royalty and the dividing of the internet. There are a million ways he could have handled the whole thing. First of all, wouldn't you want to see Jada go up on stage and give him a slap? Maybe we'd been okay with that, maybe not. Or that he'd stood up or got up and said, we put up with a whole lot of shit and this is as far as it goes, this is not cool, man. There are lots of different ways he could have handled it in terms of rebating Hollywood royalty. But you guys are right. At this point in time, he's a man that assaulted another man on the stage at the Oscars, and it's getting progressively more and more that way. And even interestingly, in the heat of the moment and from an entertainment reporter's perspective, it's such a great story. It had just unfolded. I feel more impassioned and incensed about it now than I did when I was live from the studio yesterday, because it's not just a reflection of social media, but first of all, you get to watch it over and over again, but also you get to look at the fact that he was accepting an award for playing a man who allegedly made two women famous, which was the father of the Serena and Venus Williams, and it was two men dominating the stage at the Oscars and overpowering everything else. So there's a bit of toxic masculinity about it as well.
Yeah,
and that is a vibe that's been coming out as well. Chewy, you just sent me through this picture. I'm assuming that this was taken at the Vanity Fair.
Oh my God, I love this.
I love this picture.
But look, Kate, before we go, we should absolutely do what today should fucking be about and say, please give us something on Jane Campion. How amazing was that?
It was incredible. People just underestimate what a big fucking deal this is.
Yeah,
and it breaks my heart. She is paving the way. And first of all, we have an Oscars where we've given Best Director to two women 2 years in a row, which is outstanding. The film should have won Best Picture. It's a phenomenal achievement, and it should not be overshadowed. And she is paving the way, not just for female filmmakers, but all filmmakers, with the way that she tells her stories. And I don't ever want that to be overshadowed as a result of what Will Smith did.
Yeah, absolutely. And look, just before we go, not to come back to talk about Will Smith straight away after we just acknowledged her, I just thought this is an interesting point just to leave people with, right? Amy Schumer, who did very well after the event, and we've already kind of showed that, and we've talked about the joke that she made was perfect afterwards, but she is an abrasive, at times filthy for her style kind of comedian. She could have made that joke easily. It's in her wheelhouse. What would Will Smith have done if Amy Schumer had made that joke on stage?
Do you know what? She would not have made that joke on stage.
Well,
She would not have. I
no.
swear to God, I know she can be abrasive.
But if she did, what would he have done?
Yeah.
I mean, that's
He
what
wouldn't have
I'm.
slapped her.
But that's what I'm saying. It's like just anyway. Hey Kate, I'm so excited that we've connected with you for big hairy
same.
news. And
I love big hairy news.
Yeah, man.
I can contribute. Yeah, that's the best I can
Well,
do.
we like to say it's because we chase big hairy news stories. So that's
even better. Sorry.
But thank you for joining us today. Really do appreciate your time, and I'm sure we'll be in touch again.
I hope so. Cheers, guys.
All right, dude. All the best.
See ya.
Right. Yeah, it's going, it's going to go. And look, we've had a chance to talk to the guys from White Ribbon Trust. We're probably going to do that tomorrow about, violence in general. Because the other thing this does is this gives a, what does this give? It gives an example to a whole bunch of influential people that when I'm upset enough, a hit's okay. Yet we tell people constantly a hit's not okay. You know what I'm saying? It's like, but if I'm upset enough, a hit's okay. Or if my wife isn't, because you know what I feel like? This is it, right? I feel like when my wife is incensed, it's okay for me to hit you, because an immediate reaction, and I talk about this in this pre-recorded interview, the immediate reaction was not one of offense by Will Smith. No. It might have been uncomfortable, bad joke. It might have been all of those things, but it was one, he laughed and he clapped. And then his wife got offended. So in other words, if my wife gets offended, it's okay to hit you. No, it's not. Gareth says his speech was terrible, absolutely horrific, really. Should just have said sorry, especially to Chris Rock. I agree. I feel for all the other winners who missed out on deserving their publicity. Yep. Chris Rock produced and starred in Good Hair back in 2009. He knew the issue of how different types of black hair are perceived in the black community. He knew he crossed the line. Now, I don't think anyone's actually challenging that. But no one's actually challenging that he crossed a line. What we're challenging is the disproportionate response. And I want to say one more thing. And I think I'm wrong in this. Let me say that. But we don't yet know 100% whether the joke was you're bald, you should do G.I. Jane again, or whether the joke was your husband is about to get an Oscar for an incredible performance, you had a terrible performance in G.I. Jane. Because if it was the latter, then it's actually not about this whole alopecia conversation. Now, I'm not saying it is, but I'm saying until Chris Rock actually tells us what the joke was, which he probably never will.
Yeah, I don't think he will.
I can't say
there's no win
we can't ever actually say 100% what it's about, because I mean, if it was about a bad movie, he has other ones he could have picked for her, and the bald head probably works. So that's why I'm saying I'm probably wrong in suggesting it's not about the alopecia. But equally, someone shaves their head for a movie role. They've got their head shaved now. It still comes down to the response was disproportionate to me. That's what it comes down to.
Yeah. No.
What do we have here? Crazy says an open slap to the an open hand slap to a man can be much worse than a punch. It's an insult, emasculating rather than a fight. Gareth here again says it's an award show, not a comedy roast. No justification for what he did, but they are there to celebrate artistic achievement at the top level, aren't they? There you go. All right. Hey, well, Chewy, we're about to go into a pre-recorded interview, and I know that you're going to shoot off now. Is there anything you want to kind of wrap the show with and say before you head off, brother?
No, I think I'm good. There's been some really good comments, both in the chat and from our guests. It's been really good talk. And
what about you, George? Are you going to stay with us for the next 20, or are you going to take off after we start playing the pre-record?
Yeah, I'll take off as well. I'll just, I guess, leave with one thought. Is like interesting how we perceive these events that go on in the world of television and Hollywood, right? And it's almost like people are judging Will Smith's actions as happening in this weird sort of alternate reality, right? Where they don't judge it based on the morals that they might have in the everyday, right? It's almost in this exceptional universe of La La Land where different rules go and people can be, well, that's really cool, or that's really bad, or, whatever it is. It's almost like beyond their everyday. And so they feel like they can be contradictory in their judgments.
Yeah. All right, guys. Hey, well, thanks for joining us today. We got you back again tomorrow, Chewy? You on board?
I'll be here.
All right. So Chewy's back again tomorrow. George is back with us again tomorrow, and I will be back after the pre-recorded interview to wrap up. But for now, let's have a chat with someone who was in the building when the slap happened from the New York Times. Welcome to the show, Nicole Sperling. Nicole is the media and entertainment reporter for the New York Times covering Hollywood. Previously worked with Vanity Fair, Entertainment Weekly, and the Los Angeles Times, and was at the Oscars yesterday. Nicole, thank you for coming, and I wonder if you have PTSD at any stage.
Hello, thank you for having me. Well, I was in the press room during the actual show, so I wasn't in the theater, but it was a moment I will not forget anytime soon. That is absolutely for sure. It was quite surreal, and it took everyone in the room, in the press room at least, a minute to even know whether it was scripted or not scripted. Was that punch planned? Was it part of a bit? And then once you saw Will Smith swearing at Chris Rock, everyone knew that, like, you know, all plans were out the window and things had gone completely off the rails.
What happens normally in Oscars is a person will win an award and then come to the press room and get Q&A from the reporters. I haven't seen any footage anywhere. I'm assuming that didn't happen yesterday, because if it did, I mean, there's some very plain and obvious questions that I'm sure you guys would have wanted to throw at Will Smith.
Yeah, we knew quickly that he was not going to come back to the press room after that. It was interesting that he went to the Vanity Fair party and put on a show and danced and sang to his own music and, you know, had a good time for the cameras. Whether or not that was show or not, it did in fact happen. He was not also at the Governor's Awards, the Governor's Ball, which happens right after the show ends, which is just upstairs from the theater. He wasn't there.
In the press room with all the reporters and journalists, other people came after Will Smith, but there was two awards after him. What was the general feeling when obviously other artists, other actors and filmmakers were being asked about that event, that incident? What were other people saying about it?
You know, it was actually really kind of sad for those winners, because, you know, they get to go back to the press room and they get a lot of time to answer questions and really kind of dig deep beyond their 30-second acceptance speech they just gave. So it's often a time they really enjoy. And the press room was completely distracted by what had happened and trying to parse out what was coming next. And then Will was going to win, and then his speech, and then you only had 2 awards left. And it was such chaos on the side of the journalists just trying to put stories together at that time, that those guys, when they came back, men and women, really got short shrift when it came to the kind of questions they were being asked. And they were Amir Questlove Thompson, who won for Summer of Soul right after that moment, came back, and it was the first question asked of him, and he declined to comment on it, which was probably the smart thing to do for him. And then it kind of stopped. The questions were not being asked about that because it became clear that no one was going to answer them. But it was just the whole evening was hijacked by this moment. So everything turned to chaos after it.
It was like the Kanye and Taylor Swift moment, but elevated 1,000-fold because there was an assault that happened in front of 1 billion people around the world. An actual assault. In fact, it's one of the conversations that's been going on online is that if that was a member of the public or a member of a crew from another movie or almost maybe anyone else that had walked up on stage and slapped Chris Rock, there probably would have been security flying at them from the side. There probably would have been handcuffs. You know, the screen would have gone to black. And I think in America, there was a cutout of the broadcast, not here in New Zealand, not other parts of the world. And that person would have been derided by the world over today as a lunatic, as a terrorist, as an assailant. Yet Will Smith has been getting a lot of support. I was going to bring up an article. I'll bring up an article here, actually from the LA Times. But it was one thing I really wanted to mention. The heading of the article is Will Smith's Oscar slap of Chris Rock settles it. We're done with black hair jokes. And I highlighted a part of it that says this. But his instinct, speaking of Will Smith, to protect black women, to protect his black life, was absolutely correct. Our hair, a particular point of vulnerability, even for those without of us without it. Even of those of us without alopecia, is not something to be mocked. I guess I've put up this clip on this YouTube channel, so I don't really understand the culture around here, but sitting from this side of the world looking in, I don't understand how anyone can defend a joke about here, even if it was a joke about a bad movie you acted in and here, and that involves an assault. There's no logical sense here that I can see. What about from your side of things, or your perspective from being there?
Well, I think there has been a varying degree of responses to this, and I think there are lots of opinions that are going around at this time. The joke was tasteless. I think everyone can agree on that.
Sure.
But the response was over the top, and it was too extreme. I don't think there's not a unified response here. We just saw the Academy issue its statement saying they're starting an investigation into this behavior and that they don't condone this violence. It is interesting that that the LAPD is not chosen to prosecute because it is an issue of assault, but their argument is that because Chris Rock has not decided to press charges, they're not going to go forward, or at least not to prosecute, but to investigate. So, fame gets you a lot of things in this world. And in this case, you're absolutely right. If it was a person off the street, if it was a crew member, if it was anyone else, and they did that, they would have been cuffed and taken away. They would have been taken out of the theater. And it's just so crazy that 20 minutes after this happened, he then was given the Best Actor Oscar. And the fact that he hijacked his own moment in a fit of, rage or whatever it was, is also unbelievable. And he hijacked the moment from the Williams sisters, who, got to see their life story come to fruition, got to see it recognized in all these places. And this was the one award they were winning that was going to, give them all that validation for the film itself. So that moment was hijacked as well.
Yeah, and I mean, not to belabor the point about if it wasn't Will Smith, in the New York Times, of which I am a subscriber, actually, that we've got a very good rate here in New Zealand. You guys wrote this morning that about the investigation and that they are going to investigate it. But again, it feels a little bit too little, too late to me. I mean, if it had been the journalist running from the press room to, there would have been instantaneous action gone, and that then married up against a fucking standing ovation for Will Smith winning it straight after he had just assaulted someone. And let's not beat around the bush here. That was an assault that if happened on the street between two people, someone would be arrested. The standing ovation and the love shown to him, I get that people did. I get what Questlove did, and I thought Questlove actually handled it quite sensibly when he just did his speech. But nobody's saying anything. Like, nobody saying anything. I was thinking someone's going to say something at some stage. I mean, like the winner on the night for saying something was probably Amy Schumer. And for people who haven't seen this, I didn't see this till today, because as soon as it happened, I went into must report this kind of mode. But for people who didn't see, Amy Schumer came back in quite soon after the event, and this is what she said.
I've been getting out of that Spider-Man costume. Did I miss anything? There's like a different vibe in here.
So brilliant. I mean, like, I'm from the comedy point of view, I'm not necessarily a huge fan of Amy Schumer, but I've got to say that was the best part of the night. She acknowledged it without making a statement, but no one making a statement. I couldn't believe that there was all these people and no one went, that was wrong, and you should apologize to Chris Rock. Because that's the other thing. He got the standing ovation, and then had his one time that he could have made culpa, the one time that he could have got some of people like me back on board going, heat of the moment happens, but he didn't apologize to Chris Rock.
Not at all. He did not. I totally agree with you with the Amy Schumer line. I think that was pitch perfect for the moment. And as far as the Academy goes and their decision to not remove him immediately, in their defense, first of all, it took like a good few minutes to even know whether it was a shtick or not, right? So they didn't know. And when they figured it out that it was in fact a shtick, and it wasn't in fact a shtick, that he actually slapped him and then swore at him twice. they said that they had serious discussions about pulling him from the show. Their fear at that moment was that he had already made such a huge disruption to the event that they didn't want to make it worse by removing him. I mean, that's one of the arguments that's being said, and now they're looking into it. It is too little too late. The Academy is not the most nimble of organizations when it comes to making decisions. Like, they have a huge executive committee and a huge governing board, and like, things just take a while for them to be hammered out, like decisions. It takes a while for things to be decided. I mean, go back to the Moonlight La La Land debacle. Like, that didn't work out very well. So it's kind of par for the course, but who knew that who could have fathomed that this would have happened? And, if they had the regular seats like they had in every year until this year, where they didn't have this like supper club vibe for the people sitting in the front of the theater, wouldn't have had as much direct access. Like, can you imagine if Will's in the middle of the row and has to get up and walk to the side and then go up to the stage to punch somebody? Like, he's not going to do that, right? It takes too long. In this case, he had like a direct line. There's nothing in his path. I don't know. It was It was a moment of hysteria. It was one producer said it to me. It was like, he is part of the collective breakdown that's happening in our society right now. He's just another example of it. I mean, I don't know. There's a lot there. And
the other thing, and then look, I know we're not talking politics here, but the other thing is, it kind of screams everything that the left gets accused of by the right in America. I love American politics, so we're not going to talk about that here. I'm not looking for commentary on that, but just to state is that these privileged, get away with anything that the normal man doesn't get away with. Kind of, if you've got money, you can do whatever you want, and you don't get held accountable whatsoever. Even American politicians, Ayanna Pressley, first of all tweeted out, and it's been removed, so I've got to read it from over here. It says, "Thank you, Will Smith. Shout out to all the husbands who defend their wives living with alopecia in the face of daily ignorance and insults." Now, she deleted that tweet, and that was reported in the LA Times, but she went on to also say, "My life's work has been about trauma and healing. I'm a survivor. I don't endorse violence in any form." Well, hang on.
She did good.
She just endorsed violence. And it's like everything about this that I think there is a lot of unfair and undue criticism. This is like a stereotype of all that unfair and undue stereotype and criticism. And I'm just like, I get what you were saying because you were there and the feeling, but I was in shock. I was making a video, and I put mine out before the Oscars had finished, like straight after he won. And even I was kind of like a little bit shaky going, what the fuck have I just seen? It was so bizarre.
Mm-hmm. That feeling that you had was here and heightened as well. So I understand how you felt that. Yeah, I mean, there's a ton of hypocrisy out there. There were also a lot of people who, that I spoke to right after it happened, that were appalled by so many of the things that happened, that were appalled that there was any standing ovation at all. And, in a lot of that, it's like muscle memory. Like, they stood up because he won an award, and then half of them sat back down. Like, I think people were so stunned by the moment that they weren't fully, grasping what had just happened, that they watched an assault take place on national television, on international television, we should say. So, I think there's a lot of processing that's still going on right now. And I think there are a lot of Academy members who are calling for severe action here. I mean, I don't know what's going to happen. We've had lots of people who have a lot of fame in this country who can get away with a lot of things. So it would be surprising if something happens. I think a lot of people would likely welcome it. I mean, I think most agree that the joke was tasteless, but we've all sat through tasteless jokes. We've been the recipients of tasteless jokes. We've told our children how to respond to tasteless jokes. Like, you don't hit somebody when you're upset with something. So it could have definitely been.
Let's hope Will Smith never goes to an awards ceremony where Ricky Gervais is hosting. Good grief! Imagine what would happen there. Well, hey, look, I want to ask you one other thing, and this is really me wanting to data mine your expertise as someone who's on the ground there. I'm not going to play the whole clip. I'm just going to play the first part of it. I'm not even going to play the sound. Is where the reaction that Will Smith gave immediately was very different from the reaction he did on stage. So I'm playing this so people won't hear it, but this is where Chris Rock makes the joke. That's him making the joke there. And then Will Smith laughs and claps, and then the camera cuts away. Now, what I'm really interested in is what, if the camera had stayed on him, what was the reaction between him laughing and clapping and what we're seeing now, which we don't need to see again. Because there has been a lot of talk over the last couple of years about Will Smith and Jada Pinkett Smith's relationship to do with what was his name? August. Or anyway, the guy that supposedly got in between their relationship, August entanglement. And you know, people have used words like demasculating and that kind of stuff for Will Smith. And I just had, I was wondering, I guess what I'm saying is, from the inside reporting on this, looking at, is any of that ring true? And could any of that have contributed to this? This is the famous red table talk where this meme here from Will Smith got put up, where it looked like he had just been tortured on the inside. And for people who don't know, it's where Jada confirmed that she had a relationship with this guy August, who was a young, I think, hip hop artist, but denies Will ever gave his blessing, claiming the two were separate at the time. Will Smith glaring becomes a meme. The word Googled, and the world Googles the word entanglement. There is a lot of, like, when Jaden Smith put out a tweet yesterday that said, and that's how we do it. There was a lot of commentary on his tweet of people saying, so August gets in between your mum and dad, nothing happens. Chris Rock tells a tasteless joke, he assaults him. You know, does the history of that have any part to play in this, in your opinion?
I mean, I don't know the psychology of Will Smith, and I can't really comment on what's happening. We've obviously seen this man's been in the public spotlight for many, many years, and he's had those ups and downs. He's been a beloved actor for all those years, and this was going to be the pinnacle of his career. And all I can say is, it's never going to be talked about as the pinnacle of his career. It's going to be talked about as, you know, the moment he completely lost control. Yeah, and it's still unclear whether or not there'll be repercussions in terms of if other people in Hollywood want to continue working for him. He has a lot of movies and projects coming out with high-level studios, and no one has commented yet on whether anything would go away. And I think that will all depend on how public perception of him continues, you know, in the next days and weeks and months. There's also, all these projects are really expensive and are a lot of money. And so when a lot of money is at stake, people tend to always use their values as the thing that drives them. So, although
we have seen that, as you're saying about public pressure, when the Me Too movement kicked in, there was several productions where people were removed, and you know, and production houses lost money immediately. So what I hear you saying, without saying it bluntly, is, this is what I'm thinking now, not what you're saying, is let's see if an assault from one man on another is as serious to the bottom dollar as what the Me Too movement was when it came in. Because at that stage, there was tons of things that were cancelled and people were removed from all sorts of projects. So that will be interesting to see. But look, we've probably kept you longer than we should. Nicole Sperling from the New York Times, media entertainment reporter. Thanks for joining us. Really appreciate you coming into the bottom of the world for a bit of a chat about what's happening. I said yesterday, this is the biggest news story in the world for the next 24 hours. I don't think it's the most important news story in the world, but there's no question it's the biggest news story in the world at the moment, and we really appreciate your insights into it.
Well, thanks for having me. I appreciate it. Take care.
Alrighty, that's us. We're done. Thanks, guys, for joining us. Really appreciate the input and the eyes today. It's always good to see people joining with us live. Remember that, though, you can absolutely get all of our content on demand. All of this gets uploaded. We often make clips as well of some of the things that you've heard. So if you've joined us later in the day and you missed the conversation we had with Radio New Zealand's Guyon Espiner in the first half of the show about police shootings, that'll be up as a clip in the next couple of hours. The conversation with Kate Rodger will be up as a clip in the next couple of hours, and the conversation that you've just heard there as well. Those will all be up there for people to ingest at their own leisure, but also share around. We always, if you follow me on Twitter, where's my Twitter handle? Hang on, let's try and operate this by myself. This one here. Oh, sheesh. No. Get out of there. Get in there. There. You can see at Pat Britton. That's just my name. At Pat Britton, to follow me on Twitter. We always hashtag share our shit, meaning one of the ways, probably the best way you guys can support us right now, if you're a fan of what we're doing, is to share our stuff around. You know, the more eyes we get on it, the more people we get interacting with it, the more reach we can get, the more eventually we can possibly get paid for some of our time at some stage. But this is what we're doing. And so, yeah, hashtag share our shit. Follow me on Twitter. It's the best way to do that. And also, if you enjoyed what you have seen and heard today, then share it around. Tell others about us. And I think that's about us for now. Look at that. Someone literally, as I'm talking, just followed me on Twitter. Wallace did, because it just came up on my phone. Because my phone's a bossy bitch and tells me things like, it's time for you to stand up. So thanks again for joining us today. We're back in tomorrow morning from 11 o'clock. We are probably going to talk about, I'd actually like to expand on this a little bit. I don't want to spend the week obviously talking about Will Smith and what he's done, but also there's themes around this which I find fascinating. One of the themes is there is a sector of society that for so long have been talking about words of violence. You know, you should never use violence. You should be cautious with what we do. We should have safe spaces for people physically. And some of those same people are now saying, well, that's what you get. That's what you get if you talk about a woman's hair. And I'm like, okay, come on now, guys. I think that's a really interesting thing to look at. And we will keep looking at that. As I said, we might try and get the guys from White Ribbon Trust on. For those of you who may be watching us internationally, White Ribbon Trust here in New Zealand is an anti-violence group, because there is an element of this which every person who supports Will Smith's actions is saying, on some level, if you say something offensive to me, I can smack the shit out of you. Because that's what's happened. Something, and I'll say allegedly because other people wouldn't find it offensive, but something that primarily Jada Pinkett Smith found offensive, that then took offense to her husband, then slapped the shit out of him. And I'm not actually a believer necessarily in there's, violence is never the answer, because sometimes if you are being attacked in the street by someone, then in that moment potentially violence is the answer. Defending yourself, committing a violent act for your own protection. But when you're offended, I'd probably go so far as to say violence is never the answer if you've taken a personal offense. I think that's probably a fair statement. Even though I've never said it before, so I have to think it through, and maybe there's 7 examples I can think of where it would be. But if you have been affronted, if you have been offended, if you have been upset at someone's words, I'm pretty confident saying, sitting here having not thought through it too much, that violence is never the answer. And that's what we had demonstrated to us. So everyone who is supporting Will Smith's actions and saying, I understand, is also going on some level, if enough offense is taken, or if actual offense has been taken, then violence is an option. I don't agree with that. All right, team. We will catch you tomorrow morning from 11 a.m. New Zealand time. Thanks for joining us again, guys, and we will see you then.